My fellow citizens of all nations, what do you care what other people think? It's a great book, and turns out that it has far more deeper meaning than it seemed at first. And let's dive into this book. Now, this title, "What do you care what other people think?" has two meanings. First is direct, like why do you care what other people think? Why it matter? And the second one is to don't have respect toward authority. And what it means is that when his dad essentially taught him this lesson, that basically difference between the Pope and the people that are kneeling in front of him is that the dress only. Pope has certain specific dress. And the second, when this saying came, and the most important part was when Feynman was talking to his future wife. Arlene was her name, and basically she asks Feynman something about Descartes, and Feynman's like, who cares? Like he disregarded this approach and disagreed with the opinion of that person essentially, and he was like, what do you care what other people think? This is the principle he explained to her, and both of them were using this principle later in their life, and their love story is really, I don't know, like very tragic. It really made me think. And in first part is the second part of the sequels, and we have this channel, the first part already reviewed. It's mentioned vividly how she died, and now it's a lot more details are given, how they started to date each other, how they met, and she was very beautiful, by the way, very beautiful girl. And Feynman, both of them really loved each other. Like you could see their love, and unfortunately, when they essentially wanted to they were all planning to get together. They were lovers. They were together essentially, and something happened to her. Like something started to grow. And it turned out later that she had essentially diseases. But at first, these diseases were misunderstood. Like there talks about the stupid so-called doctors that didn't knew what they were talking about, and how they misdiagnosed her at first, and how later he got pressured, and basically he regrets the fact that he was not more self-confident on those things to press at certain matters, because he like it obvious that he was very nervous and was very. He took it to his heart what was happening to her, and he would spend hours in library and studying those virus diseases that could have possibly had something to do with her. And essentially he read a lot about these things, and you could tell how he was heartbroken. And later, like when her disease turned out to be incurable, his essential family tried to talk him out of this, and they were trying to, basically they thought that Feynman was doing this because he gave her the word that they would be together. But no, like to Feynman it was like these diseases meant nothing. He loved her, and they essentially, and she loved her, but both of them essentially were in love. And the family was trying to be like, hey, was trying to talk him out of to marrying her, essentially, because she was ill, and also it was obvious that she would die in 5 to 7 year period. So, and they thought first that he was kind of feeling guilty, and the only person in his family that was like, yeah, you should marry her was the aunt that had this hotel, which we mentioned in the first part. And in the first part, it's like details how he worked with her in the hotel. And basically, but to Feynman, that really meant nothing. Like he truly loved her, really. And there is this part that basically they had this promise with each other that they would tell each other trust no matter what. And first, when Feynman heard that she had incurable diseases, his parents essentially, her parents were lying to her to comfort her, and were not telling her the truth, and and they basically guilt shamed the entire Feynman's family, and separated both families, shamed and guilt shamed the Feynman to lie at first time, but to tell her that she had this no problem, not big deal diseases. But the second time, when she truly called, she called her and asked her this question again, and he simply could not help but to tell her the truth. And on that moment, she did not blame him. And what she told him was this: "Oh, they must have put you through hell." So she essentially found out that she was going to die soon, 5 or something year period of time, but she was still worrying about him, which is really, it's unnecessary to say more than what we already said about this thing. And yeah, they were together, and what do you care what other people think comes from that she had fun in life while she was alive, and she would do a lot of she would make Feynman do a lot of stuff, and she would be like, yeah, why do you care what other people think? Like, this became her motto. And when she would ask Feynman to do something, she would be like, why do you care what other people think? Like, they truly had fun and pleasurable life, whatever that period was. And you could tell her, you could tell that they truly loved each other. But it was like so tragic, honestly, like so tragic to listen to this, read this part, because I mean, it's really tragic to look at this type of life, like, and especially when you read it, and like what type of life he spent, especially this is the second sequel. I already read the first one, so his character, his perspective, you can see it, and I mean, this tragic experience, really horrible thing that happened to him. Essentially, the both of them, and it's a conversation where when we talk about the deaths, right, and how she died, and how they lived together. They how much fun they had. What kind of person she was. It never shown her that she would complain or knock her. No, in fact, she had fun with him in life. And at the same time, you want to ask these questions, and like, would if roles were changed, would she have done that thing? But at the same time, this question becomes unimportant, and you cannot help but think about that last moment when he talks about that. It's horrible story. That when she died, essentially, he was there when she had her last breath, and how him kissed him on the last time, essentially, and how he kissed her one last time, and she was already not. Basically, it was his last goodbye to her, and this story. Like, when you listen to the details, and at the same time, this man has such a perspective, regardless of that thing. He kept living, and the question he asks there is that everybody dies at some point, but the difference between us as a couple was that we knew that we would separate ours, like, in 5 years, let's say. But most of like every single one of us will die at some point. But in most cases, it would happen in later period of life, not that on that point. And everybody will experience this death. And so, what was the difference? The period of time. In their case, they split a lot more earlier because of the deaths. And in most couples' cases, it will definitely inevitably happen, but it will happen in a later period of life. and and here is the death like appears with his power, with entire reality of the death that we don't like to think about. And Feynman talks about there that I've cried after a month at this happened. It was summer and saw the dress, and it was like if she saw her, she would like this dress. And I mean, he was like, I started to cry. I couldn't hold it, and then I mean, I felt I felt horrible reading this story. It's like truly, this is the life. This is the life, and at the same time, how his perspective works, like regardless of that thing, he still kept living, and I did not let herself down. He did not let her down, and neither himself. He kept living. He kept his curious character, and he kept living. And yeah, like this, and that moment, like when he was going to visit her, and essentially she was about to die. A car broke down a couple times, etc. He never, he never lost his calm. At the same time, he was working on this project, Manhattan project. Basically, somehow he shaped himself, prepared himself, and he talks about that. I took it a lot more easily than I would expect to take it, and it was like maybe this is because we were always prepared for this thing, and I could not help but think how they planned their life together, how they were, etc. All those experiences when they the first danced together, and I was thinking that thing myself, and what happened there, like her last breath, and I was like, yeah, this is life. This is horrible. This is, and how many times these good people suffer. And he was like, what was the deeper meaning? What was the deeper reason of it? The randomness, the simply dumb blind luck of this unlucky in this case. This misfortune, what was there? Like, what was the deeper meaning? And yeah, and like that just came, and they couldn't do anything. What was their deeper? I mean, he was like, in what terms should I think about this? Like, we've done something in our previous life, like what we've done to deserve this thing. But yeah, and they were great people. These people are truly great people, both of them. And what we've done to get this, like that's a tough situation. That's well, then they've done nothing, and there is no religious or some sort of reasons there. To him, it was completely meaningless, and just it happened what happened, and he did not kept thinking further. It's a last that they did not mention here, but maybe he kept thinking, yeah, and I certainly did. And this is like in these cases where you see that how good people suffer, how many times in this happened, like how many times, like why this like good people suffer. Should go through this. Yeah, I probably told you this story, like put you really deeply into this story, because it really was close to me as well. Like, it made me just think about this thing, because yeah, it is mentioned as well in this first part, and how he handled it. It is his character. Now let's go to other couple of notes I have here. The lessons. Everything I read, I try to figure out what it really means, what it's really saying. Essentially, his dad taught him this thing, and the idea is that, let's say he would read something, right? How this thing, what it meant in real life, he would interpret this thing. For example, when his dad would read something about dinosaurs and stuff for him, he would be like, dad would explain to him that they would reach the second floor of the house we're right now, and huge, etc. And he implemented this habit. And difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. It's a serious difference between those two things. It's essentially, to know things which all languages call different names, to truly understand that thing which all the languages call different names. That's a difference, and at the same time, there's a difference to just know the name of some sort of a species and or just simply know it deeply. And again, difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. Essentially, to know things which all languages call different names deeply, to truly understand it, rather than just know it's superficial, rather than being, just be good, typical superficial understanding, instead just to go deeply. The women teach their sons how to treat the next generation of women well. Yeah, it was something just to have in our minds. It is what he mentions when he went on his first date, and it's also interesting how it happened. He just blurted out that he would love to go to that girl, and his friends helped him to get that date. It was very interesting. He mentions they're cute, like what a character. He mentions like this third basically went on 3 different dates with different females, as it seems, and all of them, when he would walk them to their house, so they would say the same thing. And the third time, he said what that's saying, thank you for this amazing evening or something, before she would say this thing, and she was like confused because it seemed that she wanted to say that thing. And this is the character. This is like such a good man, like the character of Feynman, and how he behaves essentially. And what kind of character he was, like why became this? Like this is a character. He's a teacher, a great man, like great character general. Now, this is as he mentions, the crazy idea his dad had. If a guy was in some difficulty, look for the woman behind it. This was the perspective of his dad, and I think he mentions it when they were trying to talk him out of marrying Arlene, essentially. This is, I think, if I remember correctly, this is where he mentions it. And now there comes the part 2, where it's about how he goes to Washington and investigates the space shuttle challenge disaster. It's just part 2, and I didn't pay much attention to this thing. I wasn't interested in this investigation at all. And so if you are interested, you can find this book in books, and probably you can check out the documentary as to what happened on that disaster, and why it happened. And there was this when it talks about the value of science. To every man is given the key to the gates of heaven. The same key opens the gates of hell as well. And this is something to have in our mind, like such a powerful thing. It's from I think Buddhist religion, as he mentions. The same key is essentially is given to men. That same key opens the gates of heaven and gates of hell. And like related to science, those, like when we talk about this nuclear weapon, he worried a lot about this thing, because he took serious part in creation of nuclear weapon. Same keys open, and we should remember that the same keys open the gates of heaven and gates of hell as well. And this is it in our conversation. Just have these things in our mind, and if you want to check part 1 of this book summary, here it will be, so you can check it out. See you.